Okay, so we have before us the scores spread out for the lyric production. Why do you have two of them?
Well, actually, it's divided into Act 1, 2, and I have 3 over there because we're doing it with 2 intermissions. So they bring out each act and put it on my stand so that I don't have a huge pile, of music there, which makes it a little bit easier and just flows better.
Yeah. So I went through a piano vocal score last night of this opera, and I couldn't help thinking that if you took away the vocal lines, all the music would still be there because everything's doubled. Is that true?
Well, not everything, but it's true in a lot of cases. I mean, for example, if you look at the end of the act when we have Frank and Rosalinda and Alfred on stage together, when they're singing these waltzes, a lot of it does the orchestra. See, this is part of the deafness that I was talking about. They have to come in and out very quickly. See, right here, for example, the first violins come up and join Rosalinda, but they didn't join her for the beginning of her phrase. So they have to be listening, and then they have to just climb inside as though they were always there, and then they're out just as soon as they arrived. So there's a lot of that quick in and out and coloring a phrase and supporting the singers, which goes on constantly, really in every opera, but in a piece like this, it's even more important. And then if you look at something like, for example, the end, when Frank sings about his jail and how beautiful it is, he says, "Oh, my beautiful big birdhouse, it's not too far away," and he's trying to essentially sell his jail and say how wonderful it is because he's the jail master. But he sings, and while he's singing, we have the trumpet and the piccolo supporting him underneath. So they have to be listening to what he's doing, of course, and he's also listening to them, and then we all bring it together in a very light way. So you shouldn't really know that there are 3 people actually doing that line. It should sound like one. And this scene actually is a good example of how quickly everything has to change, because here we have Frank talking about how wonderful his little bird cage or jail is, and then we still have Alfred and Rosalinda who are a little bit stressed out because Alfred just came to enjoy a nice evening with Rosalinda, and then they find themselves in a bit of an awkward situation where he ends up having to pretend that he's Rosalinda's husband, and he gets taken off to jail falsely. He's not actually the one that Frank came looking for, but of course Frank can't know that. So you have all these things happening. Three people with three very different characters and very different energy levels, I guess. You have a little bit of anxiety, and they're talking to one another like, no, you have to pretend like you're my husband. And Alfred really doesn't care much about anything. He just enjoys life. Rosalinda's a little anxious, and Frank is anxious too, but he's not anxious because he knows anything is wrong. He's anxious because he wants to get to the party in Act 2. So they keep singing these little beautiful sweeping duets, Rosalinda and Alfred, and then underneath, so for example here, it's a very beautiful, elegant line, and then you turn the page, and boom, we get back to Frank, who says, "Sir, please, that's enough with all this sweetness," because they're saying goodbye and taking forever to do it, and he says, we have to go, that's enough, it's time. And so then the 3 of them join together and sing that sort of commercial advertisement that Frank sang alone before, talking about how wonderful this jail is, and then that's how the act 1 closes.
So for your part, that just sounds impossible. Do you know which one is your stumbling block? The one that you can't let your guard down at any particular bar? Like you're saying, there are 3 different energies. Do you make notes in your score so you know which one you have to really pay attention to? The other 2 can kind of coast, or?
Well, I think obviously you have to pay attention to all of them all the time. But the key is at those moments when it shifts, you have to know who has the end of the previous idea and who starts the next one. And you have to be very mindful of that connection. And of course it's more complicated because they're not just standing there singing the music, they're also running all over the set. So when I'm down in the pit, I trust the orchestra completely, and they can't see what's going on up there, but they can see me, of course. So I'm watching them very carefully, and you never know in opera, anything can happen. I mean, a dress could get caught on a chair, and I could have to stretch something for some reason, or someone could go in or out the wrong door. There's any number of things that could, a number of variables that could occur, which keeps opera very exciting, always. But I'm watching them for these changes, and then the orchestra is watching me, and we somehow bring it all together.
So I was just at the rehearsal with you, and I couldn't help thinking that so often when you sit in those seats in the opera house, the composer is trying to take you to another time and another place to tell his story. In this case, it's completely contemporary to the composer, and the party music that they have at the ball is exactly what those people would have been listening to, which is his own music.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. Strauss was known as the waltz king in his era. He was what we would today call a pop star. I mean, he was a rock star back then. Everyone was playing Strauss waltzes. Of course, his father was also very famous, so he came from that line. And it's exactly right. You know, someone was asking me a couple days ago, one of my friends in the orchestra said, you know, there's this Viennese Waltz rhythm. I don't know if you've heard about that, which is, on paper, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And my friend said, why do you think it started to change? Because the way the Viennese do it is they're a little bit more excited about 2. They get to 2 a little bit early, and then 3 is more or less in the place where it belongs. So rather than 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it ends up sounding like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it's a very difficult thing to get just right. And if you go to Vienna, it's sort of in their blood. But here in Chicago, we've been working really hard just to get the feel. And it's not something you can break down and analyze mathematically. It just has to be the feel. And we were talking about that, and he said, why do you think that happened? And it just occurred to me that when this music was initially being performed, these were musicians who were standing in the Grand Salle, you know, where everyone was waltzing around, and they were watching these people swing all around the ballroom in these wonderful gowns, and probably just bump, bump. And I think it comes out of the momentum of that one motion in the waltz, you know, the sort of feeling of inertia and the energy of the gyrating couples on the dance floor, because one just sort of spins into 2 with a little bit more grace and elegance than 3.
I noticed that you were conducting those in 1, and maybe people always do, but I had to wonder, how do you teach an orchestra what happens between 1 and 1 and 1?
Well, you know, actually 1, again, it's one of those misleading things. You would think that conducting something in 7/8 or any crazy mixed meter is really difficult, but I think conducting in 1 is the most difficult, because you only have 1 chance per bar to give the orchestra any information, and then you trust them and you leave them to do what they will with beats 2 and 3. And so 1 is actually challenging, but it's all about the feel, and doing it in a place like Lyric Opera Chicago is a gift, because this is a great orchestra. Not only do they know a wide variety of styles, and they're comfortable doing a wide variety of styles, but they also really listen. And when we get a cast like we have here, which is largely Viennese, I mean, this is the real thing, this is authentic what we have here, coming in, they have a little bit of that feeling in their phrases too, and the orchestra picks up on that right away, because they listen very carefully